We're going to get started. Hello, iPhone. I'm not sure who is on their iPhone. Probably Anthony Woodard, if I had to guess. You're muted, Anthony, if that is you, whoever's on the iPhone. Welcome, everyone. Nate, welcome to the call. Amal, welcome to the call. Guys, thank you very much for being here, and I appreciate your time on a Thursday evening. You're all muted, so if I do ask questions, do unmute yourself before you answer. This is one of two, for those that are new to the team, one of two Thursday evening coaching, training, mentoring sessions that the AMP team puts together for you, along with 4 Tuesday evenings provided by our other leaders. A Saturday morning, which is coming up. The Saturday morning one will be, let me just send that to Lori. She already knows. It'll be the 17th. We'll have a meeting here at the office. Saturdays are here in the training room. They're in person in the main. A lot of people do come here, but they are Zoomed and recorded just like every other meeting is. So, guys, again, welcome to the call. We've got 3 brand new agents on the call, so I think it's an appropriate way to open up this discussion on the National Association of Realtors' recent changes to buyer brokerage commissions. So whether you just got your license, so I know what the answer to this question I'm going to ask is for you folks, or you've been licensed for a while now, anything over the last 6 months. Let's ask ourselves something. Would it ever have struck us when we were listing a home with a selling client to encourage not paying a buyer's agent's commissions? Would it ever, has that ever been a discussion between any of you who've had experience listing houses and your selling clients? Did that ever come up before? That those buyer's agents who are going to bring you a potential buyer to your listed home are not going to get paid? Sheila says no. Woody says no. Mark says no. Lori says no in the room. Anybody on the call? Has it ever come up in your past experiences? Hang on just a second. This is one of our leaders calling. I should answer this. Yes, I'm in the Zoom. How can I help? Well, that'll be at 7 o'clock. Okay, bye-bye. Call me when you're done. So, guys, that's something for you to really think about. It's not something that our market of agents have ever talked about before. So that's number one. Number two, as I've mentioned before, there have been significant changes in the real estate market many times in the past. Evening, Christian. Many, many times in the past. Attorney approval clause in the contract. Loan commitment in the contract. These are things that are in the contract now, whether you're new or experienced, you kind of breeze right past them, but they are new additions to the contract. The debris, condition of the property, the debris in property paragraph, brand new to the contract, or newer. The Ohio document still has a more full explanation as what our current contract used to have on it. Lots of changes over the years, guys. Every time a big change comes about, it's supposed to be the end of business as we know it. I'll give you a kind of an anecdotal change to the market that we may or may not be aware of. Last fall, and you've heard me recount this several times, but I want you to think about this. It's a change in the market that came and went with in the blink of an eye, like all these other things have. Last fall, the number of houses on the market jumped to about 3,300. The reason why that's significant is because at any given month last year, the number of houses on the market on average was only 2,400. So it was a big jump. I mean, that's 800 houses or somewhere around there. My math isn't really good right now. And that was when interest rates were at 8 5/8, approaching 9. You were hearing on social media, the internet everywhere, national television, high interest rates are just going to cause the real estate market to just crash. You all remember that. Even if you weren't in real estate, maybe you were getting your license, you remember that. Well, that little blip came and went. All those houses got sold at 8 5/8 or 8 7/8. Nothing changed in our market. In fact, there are now about 4,100 houses on the market. So more houses have come onto the market. You get my point. Changes come and go. As business owners, we continue to do that which we got into real estate to begin with, which is to grow a business in real estate that produces an income for you, whether you have work outside of real estate or not, to either replace your current income at your job or add to it. You came into this business with a passion to be of assistance to people with the largest transaction that 99% of them will ever enter into in their lives. And on average, they'll do it 7 more or 6 more times. Most people move about 7 times in their lifetime. So I'm going to start after that. And if there's any feedback on that, I mean, again, this is just something we're going to deal with on August 17th. And we're going to train you even more tonight on, we'll do some role playing on how to deal with it. But I do want to have, Mark, you're not on your computer yet, are you? Nope. Well, I'll recount a story that Mark Hutchison shared with me just before this meeting started. He said, I sent out I had a referral, which is another point I'm going to make here in a second before we get into the training piece. I had a referral. I had helped these folks, parents, I think, or in-laws, they were related to these younger kids. They're both 19 years old. And Mark sent them the agreement and they signed it and sent it back. No questions asked, just signed it and sent it back. Yep, got it. Moving on. So there is a piece of this that we all have to kind of involve ourselves in. We can't presume that our buyers and our sellers have significant knowledge about this change. Now, we all talk about how people are hearing about it, and you're going to run into sellers and buyers that have heard about it, and they're going to have all kinds of questions for you. Well, what if that just isn't really the case? I mean, this is a law that changed and affects real estate agents. It doesn't change people's public opinion about anything. I'm not sure, other than, the big splash 6 or 7 months ago when this first started, that anybody's even going to remember that the law is changing. Any member of the public will be bringing it up. But let's not presume that we're going to be faced with a tremendous amount of pushback, and Mark's new clients are a perfect example of that. Just sign the document, send it back, understand, got it. So with that said, let's kind of get into this. Let me show you. Let's start with the listing loop. And let's talk about how we would present the exclusive right to sell listing contract to our sellers. So, guys, if you haven't listed houses, it's a blast. As we get through your training, the newer agents, be glad to go with you on listing appointments. Be glad to go with you to meet your buyers for the first time. The leadership team will be glad to go with you for the first few times that you're engaging with somebody, if it's at all possible and it fits their schedule. So let's chat about one of the biggest reasons, besides everything that I've recounted to you, which is all factual and true, why AMP agents may not have nearly the issue with this that agents who whose business is driven by transaction after transaction, meaning lead generation, brings into their purview someone they don't know at all or very well. And it's a phone call that you're trying to convert into either a listing appointment or a listing or a buyer appointment or a buyer. That is not our business model. The agent mentorship platform is designed specifically to help you grow your sphere of influence in such a way that you will be working with in your future people who already know you, like you, and trust you. It is our job as real estate owners to grow our, what we call sphere of influence, our database, our collection of potential clients, our pipeline. We call it a lot of different things. It's our job to grow it, Sheila.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, Sheila is my sergeant at arms in the room. When, for those of you who don't know, my computer gets messed up if I don't have the mouse in the lower right corner of the screen, and the people in the room can't see my screen behind me. And she's usually keeping me on my toes. She was starting to squirm and I wondered why. Then I noticed it wasn't down in the corner. At any rate, we have a business plan in place for you that allows you to grow this sphere of influence in such a way that you will be working with people that already know of you, or referrals to people that definitely know you. And these are friends of those folks. So the situation that you're going to be walking into, whether it's listing a home or assisting a buyer, should be significantly more trusting and comfortable than someone that you met over the phone an hour ago and now you're showing them a home. That is not a disparagement or a besmirchment of lead generation. We practice lead generation on this platform. We've got 2 really strong programs to train you through that if you budget for, you should deploy. However, the majority of our business is going to be with people we already know. Hell, Lori Spoon is becoming the sales agent of record for Marinova. It's a condominium community downtown, lots of expensive condos. So that's the kind of business we're training you to grow. So I'm not sure how much you're going to run up against this kind of any issues with folks that you already know because they already trust you. And that's what Mark said right after he shared with me his story. He said, they trust me, and they should. You're all good people. You have a mandate to be ethical, honest, practice loyalty, disclose things. So you'll be dealing with fear. Don't sweat it. With that said, this is the exclusive right to sell listing contract. It has changed very, very little. It dovetails very nicely with the buyer's exclusive agency agreement. That also changed very little. These documents have existed for years. They've just changed slightly due to the change in the law. I'm not going to bore you by going through the stuff that's always been there. For the newer agents, we will go through these documents when we have .loop training, and you'll understand them more fully. I'm going to skip right to the part that changed. So Grant doesn't know this, but he's going to be called on to be my role-playing buddy in this call. So he's going to have to unmute here in a minute. And he and I are going to role play through the portion of the listing appointment that will allow you to hear how the agents on the AMP team, let me go sideways here for a second. Guys, this team is set up very, very well to be an outstanding influence on what's going to take place on August 17th. And what I mean to say by that is agents who are listing homes, if they have any empathy for their fellow buying agents, which we will all be at some point in our career, right? You go through any given year in real estate, and sometimes you're assisting a buyer, and sometimes you're assisting a seller, and sometimes that client is the same. You're listing their home for them and you're helping them buy. So we will all find ourselves on both sides of this equation throughout our careers. And if we can get this team all rowing in the same direction with the role playing that we're about ready to go through, and helping our selling clients understand that other than the law changing and the state of Ohio mandating that our selling clients are not required to pay a buyer brokerage commission, which they never were required to pay. It's always been negotiable. Selling clients were never required to pay a buyer's agency commission. It was just an automatic thing. And you'll see how I explain that automation here in a minute. So very little is changing. If we can all get on this boat and row in the same direction and spread this good gospel, I pray that all AMP agents explain it this way, that all Red One agents explain it this way, and that every other brokerage house across the state of Ohio explains this new change in the manner that Grant and I are going to role play. And then I want you, Grant, to push back as much as you'd like to. We did it today. It was fun. And I'd like you guys, after we're done with that, to give me your situations that you think you might come up against, and let's talk about these fearful scenarios that you think you might come up against. I think we'll answer to most of them by the simple role play, but there could be other circumstances or other things that you think you might run up against, and we'll discuss those, and then we'll roll right into the buyer's exclusive agency agreement. So at a point in time during your listing appointment with your listing client, whose house you are going to list, because guys, once you arrive at a listing appointment, it's presumptive that you're going to be their agent. And that is your attitude. That is what you describe. That is the value you build throughout this entire appointment. For the first period of time you're spending together, we're going over these expenses towards the end of the appointment, where we're starting to disclose and explain to our client what they're going to experience. So I want you to put yourself in that scene, understanding that a lot of the stuff that we're going to be talking about has already been kind of decided. So I'm going to be making some presumptions during this, but you will have gone through this, right? We won't miss anything. So I would start out this part of the appointment this way with Grant. You can unmute yourself now, Grant. With Grant, my listing client. In my presentation, I've just gone through Grant's house, and I've gone through and staged it for free. I've taught Grant all about how buyers think, and we'll teach all of you that don't know already how buyers think and help you set up your listing client's home in the best way possible so they get the most money in the least period of time with the least stress on them. So we've staged it. We perform that service for free. We'd sit down and I'd say, now, Grant, let's talk about what we agreed to earlier, which was going to be your listing price of, say, $350,000 for his home. Sellers in our market typically experience 4 expenses, Grant, as it relates to transferring ownership in their home to the next buyer. And I'm going to go through those with you and then present to you what we call in our business a net to sellers, so you can see this in writing. Those 4 expenses are these. 1, a home warranty. The good news is, Grant, that Red One Realty offers a free home warranty, and we're going to provide that to you during the time that your home is listed. It's free to you. We provide that. If a buyer makes us an offer and asks for a home warranty, we may say no to the home warranty they ask for, and we might say we already have one. We'll gladly split that with you. It gives me an opportunity to negotiate on your behalf for an expense that you might normally experience, and we could end up cutting that expense in half. So home warranty is one. Now you notice that Grant is role playing well. He's listening because I'm telling him about his expenses. So he's being a good seller and absorbing this, right? You'll hear a question from me in a second. If you can't tell by now, for those new agents, I can talk a lot. So number 2, it's called an owner's title policy, Grant. Let me explain that briefly. In our world, a title company is going to handle the closing of your home. So when we list it, successfully put it in contract and close on it, a title company does all that paperwork for us, so it transfers legally. And that same title company is going to search back through, back to 50 years, and they're going to make sure that every time your home transferred from one buyer, from a seller to another buyer, and so on and so forth, even it could be go back as far as when it was just a piece of land, they're going to make sure that every time it transferred, that it was free and clear of any problems. An example of one of those problems that might come up, that you're going to provide the buyers with an insurance policy to protect them against this. Let's say that 10 or 15 years ago, a couple who owned this home got divorced, and then one of the folks sold the house, and lo and behold, somebody forgot to get the divorced spouse signature on the closing documents, and it's called a release of dower rights. If that got missed, perhaps, even in the search that the title company does, that owner's title policy, I'm telling you, that you pay for, it's an expense to you, and you give it to the buyer, will protect them against having any legal issues in that regard. And by the way, the seller of the home, when you bought it, bought the owner's title policy for you. Any questions so far, Grant?
No, you seem to be getting it pretty clear.
Okay. The third thing, and you're aware of this, you pay property taxes, we all do. What you're probably also aware of is property taxes are 12 months in arrears. So let me give you an example. You make your mortgage payment to your lender, is that right, Grant?
Correct.
Okay. And you make a payment that is made up of principal, interest, your property taxes, and your homeowner's insurance. Does that sound familiar?
Yep.
Okay. Well, your property taxes being 12 months in arrears, what the title company does at closing is they go back to the last property tax bill that was paid. In this case, because it's August 7th, or is it the 8th? August 8th. The last property tax bill that your lender paid on your behalf came due in June, this past June. And it was for the first half of 2023, that 12 months in arrears thing I mentioned earlier. Well, what happens for you is one of the expenses is the title company debits you for the amount of the taxes due from the date of that last tax bill up through the date of closing, and they credit the buyer that same amount. And the reason they do that is the tax bill that comes due in December when the buyers have purchased your home and they live there, that tax bill is for the second half of last year. That's a time that they did not live there. You did. So they're accepting that credit at closing, understanding that the next tax bill is their responsibility. So that's your third expense. Your fourth expense is the commissions that a listing brokerage charges to list your home. Now, typically in our market, that listing commission is 6%. It's fully negotiable. And what we would like to do, with your permission, is we'd like to split that with the buyer brokerages and their buying agents to incentivize those agents to bring us buyers and offers to your home. So I'd like your permission to split that. Again, it's negotiable. And let's just say this is August 30th. And 2 weeks ago, Grant, the law changed. And now it's in writing. The state is mandating that we say this to you. It's always been the case, but now I have to tell you, you're not required to pay a buyer brokerage's commission at all. You never were. It's just typical in this market that our clients who we're selling houses for give us permission to split the listing commission that you and I agree to, which is fully negotiable, with the buyer brokerages and their buyers agents, because we want to incentivize them to bring us buyers. So those are your four expenses. What would you like to do commissions wise, Grant?
I mean, I understand me paying you as you serving me as my agent. And I assume if you said you were going to split that, you'd probably get around 3% yourself. I totally understand that, the duties you have to me, but what's it my responsibility to cover a buyer's agent?
This is so much fun when we role play with other agents. Grant's doing the same thing that Justin did the other night. It's so hard for us as agents not to use words that are very real estate-y. He said duties. No normal seller is going to say
Yeah.
dude. I think Justin the other night said property. He didn't call it his home. It's so much fun. But so thank you for that question. Let's get back into the role playing. Grant, I completely understand that. And yes, let me recap it for you. What I'm asking of you and I'm advising you to do is list your home with my brokerage, which I know you're going to do. I appreciate you entrusting me with this. What's typical is 6%, that's negotiable. And to give me permission to share it with a buyer's brokerage, because that buyer's agent is also working very hard on behalf of that buyer, negotiating on their behalf, representing them in their interest. That's why you have me to represent you, touring houses.
Could I come in real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
I understand they're working hard for their client, but I guess what do they do for me that
That's a great question. So let me kind of paint a vision for you.
okay.
You're not, by law, you're not required to pay them anything. So I'm going to tell you that two things are going to happen when we list your home. And if you instruct me to not offer to split the commission that you and I agree to with a buyer's brokerage, two things are likely to happen. One, every offer that we get on your home, the buyer's agent is going to ask you to pay their commissions. The reason for that is the law demands it now. Now, let me just kind of back up a second. The other thing that changed on the 17th, a couple of weeks ago, Grant, was it used to be that when buyer's agents would show houses, it was right on the MLS listing what they were going to be paid. Well, that's been removed because that's part of the law. You can't advertise it on the MLS anymore. So now what's going to happen is we're going to get offers on your home and every buyer's agent's going to ask you to pay a commission to them of upwards of 3%. So that's one thing that will happen. The other thing that I think is interesting is while the law changed and we cannot advertise commissions on the MLS, every listing agent is allowed to advertise the commission being paid on their sign in the front yard. We have a system called KV Core. It's an IDX server, and it's where the MLS downloads to like Redfin. Have you heard of some of these? Redfin, Homes.com, Zillow, Realtor.com? Okay. Well, all of those systems download that information, and they get all that information from agents like me. On those systems, agents are allowed to augment those also on their listings and offer a commission. On all of social media, agents who list homes are allowed to offer commission. So the reason I'm telling you this story is because I don't want you to be in a position as my client whereby something like this might happen. We're going to list your home and I'll do whatever you tell me to do right now. Let's say you don't allow my brokerage to split the commission. You don't want to offer a buyer's agent's commission. That's fine. There'll be other houses in the area that these same agents are taking their buyers to. And those agents will be advertising on their signs and in every other place I told you about that their seller is offering a commission. It's illegal for buyer's agents to not bring people to your home and show it and cooperate with you and it's illegal for buyer's agents to not cooperate with me when I've listed your home just because we're not offering a commission. But let's just kind of think about this from a human nature standpoint. If buyers are seeing more than one home that they're going to look at and 2 or 3 of them are offering commissions and one of them isn't, I think you can come to your own conclusion on what might happen there. So I think those are the two situations. If you're going to get offers asking for commission anyway, and you are, and if we're going to be up against other agents who are advertising that their clients are paying it, I don't want to be in that deficit of a position. But again, I can't tell you what to do, and I'll do whatever you instruct me to.
Yeah, I do understand that. I mean, that's a good argument. What if, to make it a little easier on me, could we negotiate that down to about 5% total?
Well,
Maybe
Grant,
give 2% buyer's agent or something like that?
that makes sense. Let me explain to you how that would work. I'm going to help you buy your new home. I mean, we talked about that earlier in the evening. You're wanting to move to a different school system or across town or whatever you're willing to do. Remember, we would have talked about this earlier, guys, that I've stepped outside of role playing. We would have talked about this earlier. I would have already spoken to Grant about setting up an auto search for him, gathered his criteria for his new home, helped him understand how we're going to make the transition from this home I'm listing to his new home. So we talked about that. So let me get back into role playing. We talked earlier, Grant, and I'm going to assist you to buy your new home, and I appreciate you entrusting me with that. I'll get paid on that one. So sure, I'm sure I can get my brokerage to agree to a 5% total listing commission. I do want to let you know that I don't think it's fair to buyer's agents who are not a part of our negotiations, nor will they ever hear about our negotiations, because I won't disclose that to them, the particular negotiations. But I'd like your permission to give the buyer's agents and their brokerages 3% of that 5%. And then our brokerage will keep 2%. Is that okay?
I mean, if that's what you're willing to do, I do admire that, and I'm fine with that. Yeah.
Okay. Guys, at that point, the conversation about the expenses is not over. I would then show the net to seller to Grant, and I would say this. Grant, I appreciate the discussion we had before, and I really appreciate you thinking about it so deeply. What I'm most concerned about for you is what you net. I am not concerned about what we pay this person or that person. The total that you net is what I want to focus on. So what you net is most important to you, is it not?
Yeah, for the most part, yeah.
Yeah, a real silly example is if I could get somebody to offer you $1, but you netted $1 million, you'd take that deal, wouldn't you? You can say yes to that.
Yes.
Because notice that I said, if I got somebody to offer you $1 for your home and you netted $1 million, would you take that? I want to keep coming back, guys, to that word net. It is what our sellers net that we're concerned about. Keep that in mind, what you net. Okay, great. Here's the net to seller. You owe how much on your home, Grant? You don't have to give me an answer. I'll write it down. And then I would slide across that net to seller with that mortgage having been taken out now in writing, right? Because I might not have talked to Grant prior to this about how much he owes on his mortgage. I'll have a seller's net set up with no mortgage, and then just take it off the bottom of the seller's net and say, would it be cool to walk away with $116,000, Grant?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be pretty happy with that.
Okay. And by the way, Grant, that includes the 5% that we just negotiated, because it's
Okay,
all
yeah.
okay. The conversation's over, guys. Okay. Now, before we go on to how to fill this out, think of all those situations that you might find yourself in that we didn't cover just now with the objections that Grant threw back at me. Anybody can pipe up as long as it's not all at once. Anybody? Okay, let's go back psychologically and break down why we present that part of the situation in the manner that we present it. Let me repeat what I opened up with. Grant, let me describe to you the expenses a typical seller experiences in this market when they transfer their property to a buyer. Notice I didn't use the word cost. I didn't say commissions. I broke it down and eventually said commission. I didn't come right up with commissions or costs. And guys, I can say it that smoothly because it's the truth. These are the expenses typically associated with a seller transferring their property to a new buyer. Because it's all true, it just comes out of your mouth very naturally. These are expenses. Yes, an expense, guys, is more like something that you would associate with an investment. A cost is something that, to my mind, is a negative connotation. This cost me money. No, this was an expense experienced during the transaction, and you net this money. So I like the word expense more than cost, or breaking it down to commissions. Is that helpful? These are, you could dovetail into that if you'd like to augment that part of your conversation. This might help you even more, Sheila. You could say, guys, there's a couple of pots of expenses associated with any real estate transaction. The buyer has the expenses associated with obtaining their loan. That's their down payment and the expenses that their lender charges them, or the cost, you might want to say cost in that regard, associated with getting their loan. And sellers experience the expenses of transferring their home from themselves to a buyer. By the way, the buyer picks up some small expenses, but the four I gave to you, Grant, are the four that you experience. And then if there's no other pushback, guys, let's get into this because we want to run out of time. Let's get into the changes in the document. Anything else that you can think of there when you're describing the expenses associated with transferring your property that would be more helpful to explain the law? I said it was negotiable. I said it's always been negotiable. I said they didn't have to pay it. I said that they never had to pay it, but now it's mandated by the state. Notice I came back to the state is requiring this. The state is requiring this. Who's the heavy in that situation? The state of Ohio is mandating this. You're just following the law. Okay. If there's nothing else, when we get to this part, guys, and you're filling it out and sending these to your client, Grant and I agreed to 5%. So I'm going to use those as the example. That would mean 2% is going to go to the listing brokerage. It reads, listing brokerage compensation. Seller agrees to pay brokerage for its services to procure a buyer for seller's property in the amount of 2%. What?
Share the screen and fill out that at the same time.
I'll just keep going back and forth. Everybody can see it clearly online. It's just you guys. Okay, if the buyer is not represented by a buyer broker, brokerage shall be compensated in the amount of, this guys is going to say 5. That means the commission that Grant and I agreed to is all coming to Red One Brokerage. And notice that I did say that it's the brokerage charging the commission. Guys, understand that when you take a listing, it's the brokerage's listing. It's not yours. Try to keep words like I or my commission, this is about me. It's not about you. It's about your brokerage. The brokers are the ones who have the listings. The brokers are the ones who have the clients. So it'd be 5% if the buyer does not have any representation and they're representing themselves. The buyer brokerage compensation in addition to the amount above, notice it says in addition to this 2%. Seller further agrees to pay brokerage an additional fee for an offer of compensation to any cooperating buyer broker in the amount of 3%. Because Grant was very impressed with my thought process that I did not want to cut the legs out from underneath the buyer's agent who had nothing to do with my negotiations, nor, again, this is the way I run my business. Run your business the way you see fit. When I list something for 5%, prior to the 17th, I never put it on the MLS at 2.5. That's not fair to buyer's agents. They weren't there during your negotiations. Why would we send the signal to the entire real estate community that we would like to drive commissions down? Sherman Antitrust Act. We can't collude, nor can we fix commissions. There's nothing in the law that says we sure can't do a good job of keeping our commissions in a place that allows us all to earn a living. Heck, guys, 20 years ago, houses were listed at 10% and 8% and 7%. I bet there are still agents out there that list houses for 7%. I'm not going to commit to any names because I'm not sure, but I bet they exist because they have a lot of marketing expenses and they build their value really, really well with their listing clients, and their clients sign those listing agreements all day long at 7%. And that brokerage keeps 4 and they give 3. Great. At least they gave 3. So it's 2 for us. Let's just go ahead and start using terms that we can all deal with. 2 for us, 5 for us if they don't have an agent, 3 for the buyer's brokerage agency. And if, this is B, number 2, if an agent of the brokerage represents both seller and buyer as a dual agent, I would agree to do that for 4%. I'm doing it for 5 when they don't have an agent because I'm going to be doing more work. I'm doing it for 4 when I'm a dual agent because, very frankly, I'm going to just be doing my duties as an agent for both the buyer and the seller, and I consider that less work. And you're done. If you want to charge a flat fee, it's there. If you want to charge an administrative fee to your seller, it's there. There's the flat fee. There's the administrative fee.
So, same one.
Commission, yeah. So it reads an amount of commission sales price and or. I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole. There's some confusion about the and or. But that would be, yes, that would be your admin fee here to your seller, and this would be your flat fee with that being left blank if you had, you've got the listing, which you will. Guys, those are the only changes this document. Everything above it reads pretty much the same. I think, this is probably this paragraph's a little bit bigger because they're really hammering home the fact that the law has changed. But this is grants to Red One Realty commencing this date through this date to sell or exchange the property generally known as, give the address for this listing amount. You're going to enter it on the MLS here. It's going to go active or coming soon. The rest of this document is the same as it used to be. This is the only part where you break down the total commissions and offer it to the buyer and keep the rest. Any questions about the exclusive right to sell listing contract?
If you do, what the charge be at?
Mm-hmm. Just leave it as is for now. Great question. Just leave it. I wouldn't do that. I would just leave it. Mike's looking into it. One of those words might get removed.
Because then somebody could choose what they wanted it to be.
I understand. And can we just not worry about it right now? Thank you, ladies.
So, that we say,
249. Yep. If you use the full one, isn't it like 299? Yeah, and that would be if they helped you. Yeah, then 299 is if they do all your work on the selling side and all your administrative work, I think. Something
I
like
could
that.
never type that in. I tried to type it in, it looked like.
Yep. So if there's no questions there, guys, we're going to move on to the buyer brokerage exclusive agreement. So let me go back to this. And pull that up.
one last.
I got to move pictures, sorry.
So on the contract, if you scroll down to the bottom, it says 2024 Columbus Realtors 624, and that's how we know it's the front one.
There you go. Sheila just gave you the date when they do revised dates on the bottom of documents. This was revised 6 of 2024. And you shouldn't be able to find the other one, guys, on your dot loop. When I loaded these loops, the updated documents come up on every loop automatically. So try not to be too worried about using the wrong document. So you all have heard this story before, but I'm going to retell it briefly. This agreement has existed for years. It's been in different forms, but ever since buyer brokerage came about in the early 90s, this has existed. Okay. So let's go through it paragraph by paragraph. Paragraph 1, buyer representation agreement. This agreement is designed to allow a buyer to engage a qualified, listen to how it's building your value just in the way it's written, a qualified licensed real estate professional for the purpose of viewing property and receiving contract negotiation and advocacy services throughout the entire real estate offer and purchase process for the types of property described below. The types of property described below are asking you what state you are operating in. You simply put Ohio there. That's it. The undersigned buyer engages Red One Realty Broker to represent buyer concerning buyer's purchases of real property situated in the following state: Ohio. Mark, what if you're doing business in other states or referring someone to another state? If you're referring someone, allow that agent to deal with their laws of their state. If you're referring someone to a Red One agent in another state, I would probably go ahead and get this filled out and send this along with your broker-to-broker referral agreement and name both states. Put Ohio down to protect yourself in whatever state they're moving to. Length of agreement. The old buyer's exclusive agency agreement used to give you 2 dates. This is when our agency agreement starts, and this is when it terminates. Usually it was about 6 months long. This one simplified. It starts the day you both sign it, and it ends when you both agree to end it. So we'll come back to the situations you might run into where a buyer says, hey, don't know you that well, not sure I want to sign this. We can talk about all those, and we will. But for now, what I would put in here, because you're dealing with people that you know mostly, is I would just go out 6 months, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I would click on the 8th of February and be done with it. If you struggle to find a house for a buyer within 6 months, then just get a new one signed. But usually you can get that done. Agency disclosure. It's on the document. I think the Justice Department or Columbus Board of Realtors, one of the two, required it to be there. A little bit silly, but neither here nor there. You're simply repeating what has always been the case and will forever be the case, that both the buyers and sellers, when an agent's involved, will sign an agency disclosure indicating who represents who, and everybody will sign that. That's all 3 says. Number 4, broker's efforts. And guys, this, I just said listings and buyers are the broker's clients, but I'm going to, for the sake of simplicity and to help you understand it, whenever I say the word broker, I'm going to replace it with agent. So you understand. This is what the document says. So if you're recounting it to a client, read it the way it's typed. For training purposes, I'm going to say this. Agent's efforts. Agent will exercise good faith efforts to A, locate and present suitable properties to buyer, B, tour and prepare detailed analysis of specific properties per buyer's request. Those are comparative market analysis, right? You don't make an offer on a house for a buyer without knowing if what they're asking for it is a reasonable price, or at least you want to know if it's unreasonable. You want to compare it to other houses like that house that have sold in the neighborhood. So you rush back to your office and you do a CMA, and then you're talking this through with your buyer. That's another way of saying CMA. C, cooperate with any real estate licensee working with the seller to facilitate and complete buyer's purchase of the property. There it is, guys. It's right in there. Don't steer people away from houses where the seller's not offering a commission. It's against the law. And this should say D, but it says E, perform other services as requested by the buyer. Now I'm so proud of my call and Ken Fairchild, Michelle Brooks, and Bob Petty. No, they're not paying me to say it, and no, you don't have to tell them I said it. The Department of Justice loves the fact that we added this into our exclusive agreement. It's number 5, for best experience. This is the kindest, most professional, respectful way as you as an agent, you're warning your buying clients, hey, we're in this together. Here's the way to describe our togetherness. Buyer is encouraged to be accompanied by agent on buyer's first visit to the property and to conduct all negotiations for the property in good faith and exclusively through agent. Buyer understands that signing more than one buyer agent representation agreement for any overlapping period of time could expose the buyer to liability for paying additional fees. Let's briefly talk about that. You're not working with somebody who's in your sphere, or you're working with somebody who's in your sphere and they're not as good a friend of yours as you thought they were. And they have signed one of these already with another agent. And now you're asking them to sign one with you. We can talk about a lot of scenarios, guys, but in my case, after I said that to them and they disclosed to me, because the next sentence says buyer's not a party to any active buyer agent representation agreement. They're basically saying to you, nope, haven't signed one of these with somebody else. Let's say they have. And let's say they sign one with you. They go out and buy a house with you. You've got the buyer's agency agreement, make the offer, disclose your commissions, everybody's happy. You're 7 days into the transaction and you get a phone call from another agent that says, I understand that my buying client has bought a home through you. Now, Mike has said, handle it at that level. If you have to take it to the broker level, fine. But this agreement is between the buyer and the agent. So is that other agent going to go after your buying client for their commission when this closes? I don't know, but we're trying to warn our buying clients. Don't do that. What is another, let's just presume that they have done that. What's another answer you could give? I could give the answer of, well, Sheila, we're friends. I like you. And I'm not comfortable entering into this agreement. This could be one answer. I'm not comfortable entering into this agreement with you because you already have an obligation to another agent. Now, right down here, this says, Sheila, that anybody can cancel this agreement at any time. So you want to cancel that one, get back a hold of me, I'll enter into a contract with you or agreement with you. But right now I'm not comfortable. Or you could say, okay, thanks for telling me. We're going to do this. You understand what you're putting yourself on the hook for, right, Sheila? You got 2 of these out there. Yeah, could be. Don't know. Depends on how that goes. Now, if I were the agent on the other side of that and my client had done that to me, I'm not going to go after a buying client for any commissions ever. Don't have time, don't care, not worth it, not worth the stress. Nobody cares. Maybe they'll feel really guilty one day and just stroke you a check for $1,500 for your trouble. Who knows? But this document says if you haven't done more than just show them properties, you haven't done any of those things, you're not supposed to be paid anyway. So we're not even there yet, guys. We're not even at the point where we've conformed with the document. We're already starting to think about that kind of stuff. But here it is. We're warning them. Collecting broker fee from the seller listing brokerage. This is so cool. It says buyer may choose to negotiate that the agent fee be paid in whole or in part by the seller and or listing brokerage. At buyer's instruction, agent will write this request into buyer's offer to purchase the property. It's telling you exactly what I said earlier to Grant in our role play. Every offer listing agents get are going to be an ask for commissions. The possible exception, Mark's brought this up, so let's bring it up now. We'll keep rolling here. Mark said, what are you going to do? He proposed an ethical moral dilemma. So what are you going to do as a listing agent when you get an offer and the buying agent doesn't have any request for commission on it? My answer was this, and it can be different depending upon the circumstances. If my client isn't offering one, I'll know why they did that. But let's say my client is offering one. I know it. The whole world should know it. It's on my sign. And this buyer's agent didn't ask for one. I told Mark my answer is going to be to probably text that agent and ask them, did you mean to leave out an ask for commissions in this contract? Only with my selling client's permission to do so. I'm not going to call that agent if my seller says, no, don't call him. But I got to ask my seller first,
So
right?
in your conversation, say, there's chances will come out so far through the process, you might
That's what Sheila brings up a really good point. You know, let's say that we let that slide. At a minimum, you might want to warn your selling client that at some point, this buyer's agent's going to realize they made a mistake. And they may be putting together an addendum asking for that commission that we were offering. And so now you've got an offer that's devalued by that amount because you weren't expecting to pay that. Guys, nip it in the bud up front. If you're selling clients offering a commission and you get an offer without commission, call your seller and say, do you mind if I call this buying agent and let them know that they didn't put it in there? And then follow the instructions of your seller to the letter.
We had that to our seller advisory, that line.
You can ask Mike that. That's an admin question. It's a great question. Collecting broker fee from, okay, other buyers. Buyer acknowledges that the broker may represent other buyers interested in purchasing the same property as the buyer. I guess that was supposed to be there according to the Department of Justice, but that's always been the case, guys. You can have two buyers for one house. Compensation limit. Buyer acknowledges that agent may not receive compensation from any source that exceeds the amount or rate agreed to with the buyer. That's going to come up below. Broker fee. Buyer agrees to pay broker, in this case I would say broker, for any properties involving broker's efforts. See section 4. It's telling you that the one that's held out as an exception is this. If all you're doing as a buyer's agent is setting up an auto search and sending people properties and you're not doing B, C, or D, don't expect to get paid. In fact, if that's all you're going to do, why have one of these signed? Because if that's all you're doing, you're not going, if you get caught, that could end up being a fine, first of all, if that's all you're doing and they do all the other work themselves. Don't know how that could happen, but it could. So you got to do all these things. No broker fee is due if the broker's efforts involve only locating properties for consideration. The broker fee is not set by law and is fully negotiable. There it is again. The broker fee shall be due and payable upon successful closing. Normal. It's the way it's always been. And may be paid by the seller. Normal, negotiable, and normal. The buyer, the landlord, the tenant, or third party, or by sharing or splitting the fees and commissions between brokers. This section shall survive the expiration and cancellation of this agreement. The broker, here we go, filling stuff in. Sheila, you're my buyer. I'm going to ask that you agree to allow me to be paid 3%, and that I could collect some of that from you. Yep, I could be collecting some of that from you. I also want you to allow me to check this box, and I want you to allow me to ask that 3% from the seller. Is that okay? Yeah. Great, guys. Sheila is being a really good buyer right here. She says, yeah, because that's how you're going to get it.
You better get it.
Right? I'm going to put my offer together, put the amount of money I'm asking for in the seller. The seller says, we won't pay you 3, but we'll only pay you 2. We have an agreement in place that I'm going to get 3 and I'm going to ask the seller for that 3. I go back to Sheila and say, Sheila, the offer we put in place is going to be accepted. They're only paying me 2. Would you agree to pay me the other 1% or not? Answer however you want. How about we split it? There you go. You negotiate with your buyer for the up to 3% if all you're getting paid for by the seller is 2. But this agreement says, I'm getting 3 and I'm asking for 3. Okay, so Sheila brings up a great question. So we are going to go into contract and the seller's offering 2. Mike Hall can correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the way I would deal with it. Since you can't accept 3 and this document says 3 and you're only getting 2, you can't be paid more. It's not clear to me if that means you just can't be paid more, right? Or I think I should have a new one signed by Sheila that says this changes to 2 and this changes to 2. We re-sign it. As long as that's signed prior to making our offer, we're good. Because we're going to know, guys, we're going to know in advance whether or not sellers are offering commissions, and if so, how much. We're going to know in advance. If you don't know, find out. If these answers no, definitely get this filled out before you make an offer and ask for 3% in your offer. What's that?
Where do you put the one then that she was?
So this would say, this would say 2, because I asked the seller for that. This would say 1. Because that's what the buyer's paying.
So that would,
That-
would that be
I'm sorry.
3? That would say 3 and 2.
Yeah, it would say 3 down here, and it would say 1 up here. I'm sorry, it would say 3 down here. It would say 1 up here.
So. The seller's gonna pay.
You cannot get paid more, you can get paid less.
Right? Okay.
I think it's 2 and 1. I don't know why I'm arguing with you guys. I'm sorry, this would say 2. This would say 1. That's a total of 3. I got 2 from the seller and 1 from you, and that's what matches this.
So, real quick, Mark, because. Mike
Question in the room, guys.
did- Mike did give a great example for this.
Great.
First call. So what he said was for the first one.
Yeah.
That needs to be the highest because that is the limit.
The most.
You get paid.
Thank you.
So-
Christian's helping me here.
So, and.
So
what you
this
would
says
do-
3.
And then what you would do in conditional terms is you write in that the buyer would only.
The buyer agrees to pay 1%.
Yes.
Perfect. So guys, the answer in the room, which is directly from my call, is this would remain 3 in the case of Sheila agreeing to pay me 0.5%. This would go down, this would be,
That would.
this would stay at 3.
Yeah.
And down here, you would say, buyer and buyer's agent, something along the lines of agree that buyer shall pay 0.5% of total sales price upon successful closing, and you're done. Because you can't get paid more than this says, but you can get paid less. In that case, it is less by 0.5 point. I don't care as long as I'm not getting paid more than this says. Because that's the law. Now it's 6 after. I will go on as long as you ask me to. The rest of this is really easy. Cancel, fair housing, everybody signs it, you move on and start making offers. What are some of the things that you, other than what Sheila said, which is, well, that's exactly how you're going to get paid, right? You could get that kind of response, or you could get the response that Mark got, which is, yep, we signed it, we're good, we're your buyers, let's roll. What other feedback, what other pushback do you think you'll get? What are the circumstances under which you could get pushback?
And the plus is the 240.
Yes, yes, I just,
They might not be able to afford it,
Yeah,
even though they're agreeing, they may not be able to afford it.
yeah.
so Woody is saying, even if they're agreeing, which is nice of them, they may not be able to afford it. You're going to find that out because you're going to ask for your commissions in the offer. And then if they can't afford anything more than you're being offered, what are you going to do? You're going to go ahead and represent your buyer for what the seller is offering you. Guys, let's step back from that for a minute. Because when I say stuff like that, I know it pains people. We have to have some faith in our brother and sister agents. And if there are agents out there who are going through their listing presentation and encouraging their selling clients to not pay buyer brokerages, believe me, the market will correct that. You don't have to do a darn thing, especially not steer people away from those listings. The market will correct that. And we want that obviously to be rare. It's been around for decades. List for 1%. You ever heard of that? Joan Elflin putting something on the MLS for $500 and offering buyer's agents 3%. You ever heard of that? Guys, commissions have been negotiable for years and years. Nothing's changed. It's just now the state mandates we talk about it. I'm not frustrated, by the way. I'm just passionate about this.
So she's gonna do buyer.
Sheila and I are doing the buyer side of this, just the buyer side of this for all of AMP again. Then we can talk about the offer and how to write in the offer, she's saying. I do want to get you guys out of here. I don't want to bore you anymore with this stuff. Are there any questions about either one of these? This is not a tough document, guys. You'll be dealing with people you know. They know you. I need to get paid. Let's just be crass for a minute. We do this for a living. I need to get paid. You're my buyer. I'm going to get paid. I'm not going to represent you for free if I can avoid it. You know, if you could capture all this stuff, that would be the sentence. I'm not going to starve. We won't be friends after this, but I'm not going to starve. No, Sheila's being funny. Guys, you're going to build your value throughout your entire buyer conversation with them. All the work you're going to be doing on their behalf. Your buyers are going to be okay with this. If they can't afford it, they will tell you and you will work with them. Those people deserve your advocacy. You will get as much as you can get from the seller by putting it in your offer. I have worked for free before. It's very rare, and it's going to continue to be rare no matter what the law says. Trust in that. The market always corrects itself. Anything else? Sorry to keep you. I apologize. Any feedback from anybody on the call? You either fully understand this or you're too worried and fearful of asking questions, because I've heard nothing from anybody on the phone. Love you guys. Have a great evening. See ya.